Mark always looks at his phone right before the show starts. Welcome to the Midday Show. I'm Jeff Everett. He is Mark Messina. And joining us today, I'm going to refer to you as our movie correspondent, our cinema correspondent, our guru, Joe Smith of North Central Cinema here at NorthcentralPa.com. He is going to join us today, and we are going to share what we believe are personally our most influential movies. We thought, what better way to get to know three of us than through our most influential movies together? Usually I ask Mark this question. With Mark's permission, I'm going to ask Joe today. Joe, how are you feeling today?
I'm great today.
Perfect.
Yeah, and thanks so much for having me on.
We're excited.
I'm really enjoying myself.
Awesome. No, we're excited. It's amazing how many times we'll be talking about a subject or an issue, and we end up, there's an analogy from a movie or a metaphor, and typically it always comes back to cinema at some point between Mark and I's discussion.
Movies are like the shared culture or mythology of the modern age.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. So it's amazing how often that happens. Now that I've asked you, Mark, how are you feeling today?
Well, I feel good because Joe showed up as a guru,
okay,
but then he's going to leave here with even more movie knowledge after he gets to spend a little time with us.
Looking forward to it.
I was waiting to hear how he's going to respond to that.
We may have a different definition of what knowledge is. Is what we might find out. Yes, or guru is what we may find out. Before we get to this, Joe, I know you've done thousands of movie reviews. You've written some books as well. Can you just give anybody who may not know you or anyone who hasn't seen North Central Cinema, can you just give them kind of the 60-second rundown of kind of your reviews and the books you've done and just kind of your knowledge of cinema?
Yeah, I went to school for journalism, but newspaper journalism jobs are very hard to find.
Yeah.
But I did sign on as a part-time correspondent with the Williamsport Sun-Gazette in '97, and did about a film a week.
Okay.
I'm not doing quite so many anymore because they're down on space a bit.
Okay.
So I probably reviewed about 2,000 or 3,000 films during that time.
Wow.
And I did a couple of books. I did a book called The Best Movies You Never Saw, which is under the radar movies.
That's your most recent,
Yep.
correct? Okay.
And I write for a couple of websites. Now I'm retired from Loyal Sox schools now.
Mm-hmm.
But I grew up going to the movies. My father was a film critic.
Okay.
So I've been seeing a movie a week since I was like 12.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How many, if you had to guess, how many movies do you think you've seen? I know that's an impossible answer, but if you had to guesstimate it.
I would say 5,000 maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
Okay. See, as an average movie viewer, I can't even begin to fathom 5,000. I would imagine my list.
Video guides, like they used to put out those
Yeah.
video guides in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
They would have maybe 25 or 30,000 movies in them. So
Okay.
that gives you a ballpark figure of how many are out there.
Okay. No, that's impressive. I mean, if I had, I bet you I haven't seen over 1,000. Like if I really, so
if you did one a week,
yeah,
every year. So if you did 2 a week, and then you're at a high. So yeah, it would be hard. So here, my quick question, just to rattle off. What did you teach at Loyal Sox? Did you teach English? Oh, that's why I see.
Yep.
Where are you from around here?
I grew up in Buffalo.
Oh, there's the Bills
Which
fan.
is why I have the misfortune to be a Bills fan. Yes.
Well, sometimes it's misfortune. I will say this. I hear that, but I've never been to a Bills game, but I hear they're the nicest fans in football.
Yeah.
People say,
It's a
as a
great place to see
visitor,
a show.
if you're going anywhere to go to Buffalo, they treat you like gold.
Yep, and the food is great. It's great. It's a great city. It's a great place to live.
So, okay, your dad being a film critic, I didn't know this. This is fun. Is there a classic film that we would know that you are on totally different ends of the spectrum that he loved and you hated, or vice versa?
Not too many. There were a couple of times when he reviewed a film that I loved, or he hated it, or he hated a film that I actually wrote a couple of angry letters to the paper. And they published it. I was only 16 at the time. I don't remember anything in particular that we disagreed. More what I remember, Mark, is the movies we went to together and both really came out thinking, wow, that was really good.
Okay.
Like, almost life-changing.
Well, as a 16-year-old, you're supposed to disagree with your dad.
Yeah.
Even no matter what he says.
Yeah, well, I didn't have quite so much of that in my family.
No?
I didn't have quite so much the teenage rebellion going on. I didn't become a rebel till I was 40, let's put it that way.
You were just behind the time.
So before we dive into some of our picks, I just had one question that I thought would be interesting, because when I sent the text message to both of you, I want to try to come up with a way to not just give our top 3, something that dove in a little more to introducing ourselves. I think the neat question here is what makes a movie influential to you, or what is it about a movie that can drive somebody to think differently? Or those were some of the things going through my head when I was trying to pick my top 3. Is there something that you noticed as you were thinking of your movies, like a common theme or something that you noticed that made a movie influential for you?
Are you talking to me?
Anybody.
Sure. Well, I think this is probably a good thing for us to establish right at the beginning, because we're going to wind up arguing about who's
Sure.
better, probably.
Sure.
But there's
It's not going to be much of an argument. other than-
he says arguing.
Yes.
But there's an intensely personal element to this.
Oh, yes.
The movie comes maybe at a certain time in your life.
Yes.
You're very receptive. It connects with you. So it may not even be all that great of a movie,
Mm-hmm.
but it just happened to resonate with you at the time. And I think that's probably the kind of thing you were looking for. So we're
100%.
the 3 of us are not going to sit here and say, these are the 3 greatest movies ever made.
Right.
We just happen to have a connection with them.
Well, one of the things that I'd heard when I was talking about someone who's in the business, and they said what makes movies and any kind of entertainment, whether it's music or books or whatever, so unique. You could take 10 movie gurus. We could take 10 of you from around the country, and if you said, what was your favorite movie of last year? They're like, not only would everyone at the table not agree with it, but someone would probably say, I gave it a thumbs down. Just because it spoke to you doesn't mean it spoke to them. And you're right. We all come from different perspectives. So that's one of the fascinating things.
The word that Joe kept saying to me was time. And what I noticed when I was going through, I had like a short list of 10, and then I kind of chopped it down on a piece of paper. And what I noticed is every movie was between 94 and 04. And I think that was when I was figuring out who I was, what I wanted to be, how I thought about the world. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that I know, Mark, your list, they all fall in a 10-year gap. My list, they all fall in a 10-year gap. And then Joe, you have 2 of them that fall within that 2-year gap that I'm assuming, but I'm not sure if that fell into your list. But I noticed that it fell into this window of time where personally, I was trying to really figure out the world.
Yeah.
I think, as you said, when you were figuring out who you were, have you got there yet?
No, I'm still figuring it out. Still, that's why we joke that this show should be called Thinking Out Loud, Joe. That's what we've determined that should be the nickname of the show.
All right, so who's first?
Let's
start with Joe.
Let's start with Joe since he's the guest. And I don't know if you have an order to yours or not, but go ahead and pick one to start us off with.
Well, the first one was easy, Jeff. I had Vertigo from 1958, which is Hitchcock's movie. I don't know how much you want me to say about it. I do think Vertigo is the greatest film ever made, and I'm not alone. It's at the top of a lot of lists.
Okay.
But I'll try to keep this brief so as not to monopolize it.
No, you're fine.
But at the time I saw Vertigo, I was in college. Vertigo was not able to be seen. There were 5 Hitchcock films that were in litigation when he died.
Okay.
And no one had seen Vertigo for like 12 years, unless they happened to have a pirated copy.
Huh.
And I was taking a Hitchcock class at Syracuse University, and my prof got a copy of Vertigo. And it spread like wildfire through the campus. That place was packed. It was SRO in that auditorium.
I don't mean to break your train of thought.
Yeah.
Just, did you mention why was that the case?
It had to do with who had the rights to show it.
Okay.
They hadn't done the paperwork right.
Okay.
It was a very technical thing.
Huh.
And I was so blown away by the film, by its audacity, it just breaks the storytelling rules more than once, that I said to my professor, you gotta let me see that again.
Okay.
And he said, come over to my house tomorrow night, we'll watch it again. And I did. And that was kind of it. And then the other thing is, once that litigation got cleared in the mid-'80s, they re-released all 5 of those films.
Okay.
And so Vertigo entered theaters, not having been shown anywhere for about 20 years. And I was living in New York City at the time. I probably went to see it like 7 times, just because when do you get to see your favorite movie in a movie theater in New York City?
Right.
And that kind of sealed it for me.
Huh.
It came out originally and then it was pulled back?
Yeah, it was only available for about 10 or so years, and then it got, when Hitchcock died, it was just all tied up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where
I
does,
didn't know that? That's interesting.
for someone, because I've seen Vertigo, but I don't, I'm not somebody who is necessarily in tune with Hitchcock. Where did that fall in like the Hitchcock career? Like, how does that, was it early? Was it late? Was it the pinnacle? Like, how does,
Golden Age.
okay.
I don't know how familiar you are with Hitchcock. I think he was the greatest filmmaker ever. But if you look at, there's a period in the 50s, and he made Rear Window, which is a film that everyone should see, Vertigo, North by Northwest, Psycho, and The Birds, and he did all that in about 6 years.
Huh.
And if you just look at Vertigo, North by Northwest, and Psycho, he made those. They were made in a row.
Okay.
58, 59, and 60.
Okay.
You could scarcely come up with more different movies than those three movies.
Sure.
And you just can't believe they came from the mind of the same guy.
Yeah. What's amazing is I'm not an old movie guru, and I've seen 4 of those 5. And that should tell, like that alone, just that it made it to my circumference of movie viewing says a lot.
Yeah, and movies that came out decades before you were born, probably.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Yep.
Interesting. Mark, what do you got for us?
I saw The Birds.
I said, there you go. Nothing wrong with that.
That's it. You want my first one?
Sure. What do you?
We're asking?
Yeah, whatever.
My most influential is Good Will Hunting.
Okay.
I think from the standpoint of it made you laugh, it made you cry, and I one of the things that as I've gotten older with TV dramas or with comedies, whatever, I can't stand the one element. Like I used to watch Grey's Anatomy all the time, and I loved Grey's Anatomy. But all they did was yell at each other, and all they did there was tension, and there were very few light moments.
Okay.
And I've noticed in life that even in like if you were at a viewing or a funeral, there's still laughter and there's still and that all of life, even in the tensest moments, there's laughter, and even in the funniest, most lighthearted moments, there's seriousness. And I thought Good Will Hunting brought that together well for me.
No, totally agree. I have do you want me to bring it up later, or do you want me to bring it up when I mention one of my movies?
What? Why?
Joe, I really like Good Will Hunting. Like, really, really like it. And I'm like more of a Robin Williams fan than the average moviegoer. So Good Will Hunting kind of nailed it for me in a lot of ways. I cannot stand that he has to go after the girl at the end of the movie. And we'll come back to this when I bring up one. Actually, should I flow into mine and just bring up mine? Yeah, so one of mine is, to this day, is Shawshank Redemption. For me personally, at the age I was seeing it, just the idea of hope, finding a way through things, finding friends in the, I don't want to say like Garth Brooks' lowest of places, however, but being able to still know that you can find relationships wherever you go if you're willing to seek them out, find hope wherever you go if you're willing to seek them out.
And you knew sooner or later you'd end up in prison.
Well, not quite, but
you set him up for that.
I did. But one of the things about Shawshank that I've always appreciated, and it's almost the anti-Good Will Hunting at the end of the movie, is that there is no relationship to seek at the end other than your own personal goals, your own personal hope, whatever it is you are seeking. It doesn't rely necessarily in another person. And that is one of my favorite things about Shawshank Redemption, is it really is his internal battle of keeping hope alive, finding a way. And then at the end of it, he reconnects with a friend, but it's not necessarily a romance. He's not chasing after a girl. It is just him at peace, knowing that he held on to hope and he made it through it.
Don't you think the ending really depends on his reconnection with that?
I think it doesn't. I think it does in the sense for the movie, but I don't know if it does for Robin's character. Is that fair to say? If I'm missing something, please enlighten me. Because I think for the movie, I think it mattered that Freeman makes it there and they reconnect. But for his personal character, I mean, if he's working on the boat and he's on the shore and it is what it is, like a part of the character had to know there was a chance he might never make it there.
Right. Yeah.
So personally for me, just the idea that is it. There's no romanticism. There's no opposite sex connection. It is just, I made it. I kept hope alive. And Good Will Hunting for me is an incredible movie. It just drives me insane that he has to go back to get the girl at the end.
The issue with Good Will Hunting is explained to you.
I know. Go ahead.
Explain again. The issue with Good Will Hunting is his issue was that he'd shut people out because he'd been abused.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't necessarily about a girl, but it was about letting someone else in.
Mm-hmm.
Because in Shawshank there were no female characters in the whole movie.
Sure.
So there was no place, but it wasn't about him refining love, or his was just about hope. You're right, and freedom and hope. But Matt Damon's character was all about breaking down the walls and allowing someone to be close to me again.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why, you saw it with Ben Affleck and you saw it with Robin Williams, but the the biggest step was obviously towards Skylar.
Mhm.
So that's what it was about.
Okay.
He needed to let someone.
Let's judge, jury, and executioner here in the middle, if you will, please.
Well, I hate to do this to you. But
That's okay.
most, if you're a movie fan at all, you know the Internet Movie Database, which
Yes.
is the biggest movie website on the internet. And what they do is, you can, if you remember there, you can rate a movie out of 10. You give that, and if a movie has like 7.5 out of 10, that's really good because the people on IMDb are very discriminating. So if you get up towards 8.8 or 9, you're really doing well. And they keep a running list of the top 250 movies according to user ratings.
Okay.
And so because it's according to user ratings, it switches sometimes. Occasionally it's The Godfather. Right now, I can't see that.
There, we can
That's
see it there.
Shawshank.
Okay.
Number one.
So Shawshank is number one right
Number
now.
one at IMDb.com in their top 250. So you're in good company, my friend. A lot
There you
of
go.
people find that they find the movie a beacon of hope,
Okay.
especially because there's so much pain and misery in it. And I
Mhm.
think it's remarkable that that's also based on a novel by Stephen King.
Yeah.
Who doesn't normally strike you as someone that would offer a lot of light and hope to the world.
We're right.
But apparently in this story he did.
I'm with
Oh,
you.
it's and one of the other thing, it is like the greatest. Supposedly, it's the greatest movie ever that has no female character.
Yeah.
It is.
Oh, yeah, that's a good
I think
point.
his wife is in. Isn't there a female one scene at the beginning before she's murdered?
There's the one scene, but to be honest with you, I can't remember if she's actually physically in the scene or not.
I don't remember.
It's a good
But
point.
It is. No, it's brilliant. And Morgan Freeman's somewhat talented too. He doesn't hurt.
No. Joe, what
He's
else?
had a decent career.
Oh yeah, Joe, what else do you have for
Yeah,
us?
so in order to talk about this, I'm gonna go get something which I should have on the couch here. So
No, that's all right.
give me just a
Go
moment.
for it.
This next portion of the show brought to you by whatever Joe's grabbing.
No, I knocked it off.
He brought a cheat sheet.
Now I brought my book.
He's
So-
downloading his answers as we speak.
So Jeff said that he had not heard of my second movie, which is called The
Correct.
Train from 1966. And so I thought I would make a shameless plug. This is one of my books, The Best Movies You Never Saw. The Train is in here.
Okay.
If you like trains, The Train is unquestionably the greatest railroad movie ever made. And again, I can get awfully expansive about this, so I'll try to be brief. It's a black and white film with Burt Lancaster. It's very loosely based on an actual World War II incident in which the Nazis attempted to steal all of the priceless paintings out of the Louvre and get them out of Paris just before Paris.
We were just talking about the monuments men the other
Yeah, it's
day.
basically the same incident, except
Okay.
they really did put them on a train. Now, in real life, the train didn't get much more than a couple miles out of Paris before the Allies nailed it.
Okay.
But in this, it's basically, in 1966, there wasn't even such a thing as an action movie. But The Train is an action movie.
Okay.
It has 3 or 4 of the most spectacular stunt scenes that I've ever seen filmed. And there are no special effects. There's no models. There's no slow motion. Burt Lancaster learned how to drive a train. Whatever train wrecks and explosions you see, they're all real. There's a shot where they had put a couple of cameras and the trains went flying so far and wide that they actually wrecked all but one camera. So what you see is, you see this camera at trackside looking up, it's right next to the rail, and the steam engine comes roaring down, jumps the tracks, sprays gravel into the lens, and the wheel is spinning like this, like 6 inches from the camera. And the director said, Frankenheimer said, "We're lucky we had that camera there because the other ones all got destroyed." Now, the reason it's important to me is I love trains.
Okay.
My father and my grandfather were both railroad men. But also, my dad let me stay up late when I was like 8 or 9 years old. This is a whole different era to think about when I was a little kid. So different from what we have now. If you wanted to watch a movie, you had to find it on TV, and it might be on at 2 a.m., and that would be it. There were no DVDs, there were no VHS, there was no streaming. This was it. So my dad said, "Look, this movie's on. You're going to be up way past your bedtime, but watch it anyways." And so it made quite an impression on me. I felt all grown up.
Okay.
It's a fairly violent movie, so I felt like I was entering.
You said there really weren't. Is there anything comparable to it in the 60s? Like, was anybody doing anything like this in the 60s?
You mean in terms of
Just as
action?
far as like action movie or just even like
I think
stunts.
it's Steve McQueen.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. With cars, sure.
Okay.
You got Bullet, which I think is 68. And then this director, John Frankenheimer, who's a favorite of mine, he also did The Manchurian Candidate.
Okay.
Frankenheimer made what many feel is the greatest car racing movie ever made, called Grand Prix. He had the cooperation of the Ferrari Auto Company with that. And that has comparable action scenes.
It was better than Talladega Night.
No comment on that.
No, interesting. Mark, what do you have for your second choice?
Well, I was just going to say the greatest train movie of all time is Unstoppable.
I knew you were going to say that.
Without a doubt. Filmed right over there somewhere. My number, I will stick with Burt Lancaster and I will go to Field of Dreams.
There you go.
Okay.
Because as everyone knows, he was Moonlight Graham.
Yep.
I don't know if that was the last movie he ever made, but it was close.
Close to it.
It was close. And
Awful
Yeah.
movie poster. Can I just
Jeff
say
doesn't
that
like
right
the
now?
movie poster.
I don't
never
love the
thought
movie
about it
poster.
until, the reason that this was influential for me is because I love baseball, and now that I get it. When I first saw it, it came out, 89, I think we said, so I was in high school. And of course, when you're in high school, you know everything. And there's no talking to you, you just know everything. And I know Stu, and I was like, he's hearing voices, he's hearing, and I remember then I was in my 20s and I was in a real job and I was a college graduate and I was living in Baltimore. And a friend of mine was talking about it, and I told him how stupid the movie was. And he just very calm, he was way older than me and he had kids, and he just very calmly said to me, he goes, "That's not really what the movie was about. I think you should watch it again." And I was like, yeah, of course I was still full of piss and vinegar, and I told him, and he said it again. He's like, that's not what it was about. Go watch it again. And I did, and then I got it.
Yeah.
And so that was the one to me that it's not what are they trying to tell you? And it might be a little deeper than what's right on the surface. So so that changed my whole viewing perspective of the movie. That it's not just really about a dog. Like what is behind the story. So that's what changed it for me.
Have you read the book, Mark?
I don't read books.
The
I
reason
say this
asked
to an
is-
English teacher. But if he's watched 10,000 movies, he hasn't had a lot of time to read books either.
Well, I beg to differ. But what I don't watch is TV, and that's why I have a lot of time on it. But I did want to give you a little tidbit, which you might find interesting. In the book, which is called Shoeless Joe, the James Earl Jones character that they go to get out of obscurity is not a made-up writer. In the book, the James Earl Jones character is J.D. Salinger.
Oh, really?
Catcher in the Rye. But Salinger had a notorious hatred for films. And when they made Field of Dreams, they knew if we put him in this film, he's going to sue our pants off us. So they changed it to somebody else. But if you're ever interested, I understand this. I haven't read the book either, but I understand.
I think one of the fascinating things too is because baseball is America's pastime.
Yeah.
But the writer of the book was Canadian.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Okay.
Either that or the writer of the screenplay, but one or maybe both. But the writer was Canadian. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead. So you got a Burt Lancaster film for us?
Unfortunately I don't. This might be the most influential as far as like just a human being a person. Saving Private Ryan for me is probably my most influential movie. My story behind it, not that you need a story for Saving Private Ryan to be influential. I was an 8th grader in school, and I was a young 8th grader. I was 13, and I had a health teacher who actually showed this to us on, I believe it was Veterans Day week. Or was it Veterans Day or President's Day week? I can't remember which one it was, but he showed it to us, and he got permission from the school to show the opening sequence. So taking the beach. And I just remember, when you're in 8th grade, chatty, sarcasm, everyone's a jokester, class clown. And I just remembered at the end of that, there were just 30 kids dead silent.
Yeah.
And you could hear a pin drop. And I think for a lot of us, it was the first time really understanding just basic warfare, basic sacrifice of people, veterans and people from the past. And I'll just never forget that silence in the room after the end of that 10. Yeah, go ahead.
I saw that on opening weekend.
Okay.
Of course, I was a big Spielberg fan.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I plopped down in the field with my big bag of popcorn, and it was pretty full. Most of the guys in there were older than me, probably a lot of veterans.
Yeah.
And I remember I had a handful of popcorn, and I just couldn't get it in my mouth through that opening. I'm like, this is not a popcorn movie. And the same silence is descending on the
Yes.
theater, except as the scene goes on, I can hear grown men sniffling around me as they're remembering what combat was like.
Yep.
So visceral. Well, that's Spielberg. The guy's just a freaking genius.
Yeah. Really, really good. So that one, just that influence. But the other thing it did to me too is, this was a gym teacher showing us this film, and I do remember having kind of this epiphany of like, teaching is more than just the action. There's so much more to the influence you can have on a kid than just like, today we're throwing a dodgeball, or today 2 + 2 is. And it was the first time I kind of realized that like a teacher can really shape. I knew they mattered. I knew that like they were there for me every day. But the first time where someone was actually like teaching me something beyond the agenda and showing me kind of how the world worked, and no, like this is real, and this is why you treat veterans the way you treat them. And so that is, for me personally, this is by far the most influential movie. It just, right time, right place, right moment. It has always stuck with me.
You don't mind my piping in. I feel that Saving Private Ryan is the greatest horror movie ever made.
Okay.
It's hard to pick a better one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Joe, do you want to hit us with your last one?
Why, sure. I had a hard time. You're talking to
The
guys
third, it was hard for me to get a third one too.
Cutting it to 3 was difficult.
The first 2 I thought was okay. The
Yeah.
third one was hard.
I changed my mind 3 times. But I put Casino Royale down, even though you don't necessarily have an influential movie that you see when you're 46 years old. But I've been a James Bond fan ever since I was a little kid, and and it comes from reading the books when I was younger. Ian Fleming was just a fantastic writer, and you're talking to a guy that reads Shakespeare, Dickens, and all that stuff for fun. But I still think Fleming is one of my very favorite writers. And when the Bond franchise had kind of gone off the rails in the 90s, and they just whatever sparkle or clicking they had, they lost it. And with Casino Royale, they just said, just clear it all out. We're going back to the first book. We're going to start this whole freaking thing all over again.
Okay.
And what a movie. 2 hours and 25 minutes of nonstop mayhem. Just so well made.
Do you think there was something to, essentially what you're saying, like fresh start, like wipe the palate clean?
Yeah.
Was there something to seeing that as like a mid-40s male? Like the idea of like starting fresh, like starting over again? Or
that. Sure. Most of the Bond actors have been about my age.
Yeah.
So maybe I connected with, old guys can still be tough.
Yeah.
Because, and also the fact that Daniel Craig was, I went in with low expectations too.
Sure.
I'm like, dude, you hired a blonde James Bond, are you kidding me? And, Craig had been in.
The girl can be blonde, but not James Bond.
Yeah.
Craig had been in Tomb Raider and Road to Perdition. Both of those films he played a jerk. And I was thinking, you picked the wrong actor, man. And about 20 minutes into that film, I could just completely change my mind.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry that they let him go, but he's moving on to better things now.
Well, I was fascinated that in picking a Bond movie like, how could you pick one? How could one Bond movie be one of your most influential? That's interesting.
Well, Goldfinger is also an incredible film, but frankly, I think Casino Royale is better. And so I had to pick a Bond movie just because I love it. And I think that's the most franchise films I've reviewed for the Sun Gazette. I reviewed 8 James Bond movies for the Sun Gazette in my career. So including the latest one, No Time to Die.
Can you give us the 20-second synopsis? How did you feel about the ending? The most recent one.
It was balls out, to be honest with you. And I sat there for about 5 minutes trying to process it.
Yeah.
But I was good with it.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting. Mark, hit us. What's the last one?
My last one, and it was hard because I come up with a couple, but I just thought Back to the Future because it was, it's one of those movies that I've seen it, I don't know how many times. If I saw something again, I could find something else that I'd never caught before. And it just kind of showed me this was the one of the complexities, but it's so simple. And the brilliance of the story is with all the other stuff going around, and Dr. Brown, the time machine, and the lightning bolt and 1.21 gigawatts. This guy goes back in time, and his mom accidentally falls in love with him and jeopardizes his own existence. And the brilliance of that, like we've done time travel, we've done backwards, we've done forwards. This guy's going to go back in time And he happens to be when his mom is 18 years old and she falls in love with him. And if she doesn't then fall in love with his father, he doesn't even exist. And it's just so clever. And then all the other stuff that they interwove is just brilliant. But like, is it my favorite movie ever? No. But I think with all this stuff, it's one of the most clever movies I've ever seen. And that is what I love about it.
Yep. Very well done.
Do you, as an 80s movie, I have this philosophy on 80s movies, and we'll ask you because we don't get to ask somebody very often.
I know you're going to say someone intelligent.
Well, yes, listen. The intelligence in the room has lifted today. Yes, I did. I didn't want to offend you.
Stop talking to me every day.
No. The 80s for me, and again, I was born in 87. I'm the 90s kid, that whole vibe. The 80s for me, when I went back, like in the 2000s, when I was a teenager in college, and I went back and tried to watch a lot of the 80s stuff, everything felt like cart ahead of the horse, just as far as just stunts and effects. And just, it felt like we knew all this stuff was coming. We were going to be able to do all this neat stuff, but we weren't quite there yet. I feel like Back to the Future evaded that. It's one of the few 80s movies that I enjoy. And I feel like somehow they made it work. The future, to me, seems like what the future would be like if you were creating it in the 80s. But my 80s take is I always felt like it was cart ahead of the horse. How do you feel about 80s movies? Well, so like when I think of the example I always gave, like when I think of movies in the mid 90s, if Jurassic Park would have been made in 85, I don't think it would have worked. I just think it wasn't quite ready yet. And so if you look at what a lot of the 80s did, it felt like they knew this stuff was coming. The technology was coming, the stunts were coming, all these different ways to make movies, but it felt like they hadn't perfected it yet. Like they were trying to figure out. I felt like the 80s plowed the way for a lot of great mid 90s movies. That's how I feel about the 80s. And that's just my opinion. I realize that there are people who adore and love what the 80s means to cinema. I'm just not one of them.
I think the 80s this is going to sound very unmasculine. I think the 80s had a sweetness to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about the stories. And it was about Ferris Bueller and the Breakfast Club. And, because Star Wars had come before, and I know Raiders of the Lost Ark is one of them, but there was just a lovableness to like the John Hughes era.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't anything about technology. It wasn't. I know we talked about When Harry Met Sally. When was Harry Met Sally?
It was 80s. I can't remember exactly.
So I thought the 80s was more of a story era than a technology era.
Mm-hmm. No, that's very possible.
Because you got movies like Top Gun, which is both story and action. So
Top Gun is officially a comedy, in case anybody didn't know. If you're a
Christmas movie.
What's
yes,
that?
It is.
Yes, and I joke now with people, like, if you're a 20-year-old and you've never seen Top Gun and you put Top Gun in, it's a comedy. Like, they're laughing the majority of the movie. And so the 80s, I never referred to them as cheesy. Have I ever called the 80s cheesy? I've never done that.
But the 80s was cheesy.
Yes.
It was layered with cheese.
Yes.
We know it.
Okay. Well, there. If you're willing to admit it, then there you go. So that's
what's your last?
My last one, and this is 100%. This was a homer pick. This was just for me. Pete Berg's Friday Night Lights. It was made in 2004. If you've never seen it, it's about big time high school football in Texas. There's a couple of reasons this resonated with me as a high school athlete. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Friday Night Lights by now, things don't go the way they had planned at the end of the movie. The way they handle it, the way the town handles it, the way the parents handle it, all those things, I knew I wanted to be a coach. So it just personally resonated with me for that reason. That stuff aside, what Pete Berg does in this movie, you feel like you're getting hit by a linebacker when things happen. And so just the authenticity of taking a sport like football and making you feel, he did something in sports movies that few people had done before 2004 and making you feel like you were in the action. My third and final thought, and I've always appreciated this about the movie, his ability to world build around this. Like, you feel like you know what it's like to live in Odessa, Texas by the end of this movie. It wasn't just about football. You understood what it was like to go to high school and the game mattering on Saturday, what it was like to be a parent in Odessa, Texas, what it was like to be a kid, the third string running back for a high school football team in Texas, and how hard, keeping a girlfriend and the difficulties of it. When that movie ended, you felt like you had lived in Odessa, Texas for 5 years by the end of it. And it was the first time in my movie watching experience that I realized you can have the best character, you can have the best relationship, you can have all these different plot twists, but if the world building isn't done right, you don't really have much.
Yeah, and that's all the director.
Yes.
I did not know that was a Bird film.
Yes.
You know, he's got like the he did Patriots Day, which was an incredible film, and Survivor.
Yep.
And Deepwater Horizon.
Yes. He also did 8 Mile, which a lot of people don't. That's just kind of like a background. He did 8 Mile. Yes.
He's got the creds, you know. He does the world building, and that's why those films work so well.
Yes.
See, I think the best Texas high school football movie is Varsity Blues.
There's nothing wrong with Varsity Blues. It's just not Friday Night Lights. So for me personally, not only did I relate to it because of who I was, it was the first time I was like, who directed this? And again, it was 2004, so I was getting near the end of my teens, and it was the first time where it wasn't enough just like, oh, that movie was awesome. I was like, who is Peter Berg? What else has he done? Like, I want to see, because I was so fascinated that he could do that in 2 hours. I was like, I know everything there is to know about living in Texas. And that just really influential for me. Right time, right guy, right movie, just kind of all synced for me.
So before, and I don't know what our time schedule is, before we let you go, where can we get, well, first of all, your book was the 100 Best Movies You've Never Seen?
It's 300. It's called The Best Movies You Never Saw.
Okay, what other book did you said you have multiple books, right?
I did a book on Psycho, the Hitchcock movie.
Oh, okay.
I did a book on the Bible. It's called Sex and Violence in the Bible. Now, with a title like that, there's 3 things there. You got to be interested in one of them. And I did a book.
Or you could be interested in all 3. There's, you know.
I did a book on church life, and right now I'm working on a couple of other things.
Where can we get that book?
This is at Amazon, and also Autos.
Can you get them all on Amazon?
Yes.
Okay.
And Autos has a couple of copies of this.
Okay.
They usually have a couple of copies floating around. Yep. And if you love movies, this is a fun book. It's, you know, I have several books out there, and people sometimes argue about whether the book's any good or not. But this one has all 5-star reviews at Amazon. Everybody who reviewed it said that they thought it was really great.
Well, I do
Awesome.
think if you're a moviegoer, there's that thing. And I remember it used to be when you went to Blockbuster and you were looking for that movie that kind of like nobody else has found yet. So music kind of has the same thing to it. There's what everybody knows and what everybody's popular, but you're looking for that under the radar or something that no one's ever heard of.
Yep. So that's what these are. These are under the radar movies. Yep.
And,
Awesome.
No, that's cool because you can't be a moviegoer. You can't be a movie enthusiast, I should say, and not be interested in something like that.
Well, the timing is great too, because we talked a lot during lockdowns and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You just started to run out of stuff to watch, and you almost needed somebody to say like, "Hey, here's this neat thing you've probably never heard of." So I think the timing for the book. There you go.
I was watching like 6 movies a week to get the book done.
Okay.
And constantly writing to my friends saying, "Here's one, here's one, here's one, here's one."
Yeah.
Because everybody was really relying on streaming.
Yeah.
During that time.
And the algorithms kind of they kind of stuff down your throat stuff you've either already seen or stuff that you feel like is duplicable of stuff you've watched. So it is, you almost do need like these generic lists or books or something to kind of say like, hey, by the way, here's all this great stuff that the algorithms or that the streaming services aren't putting in front of you.
Yep.
What's great is when you have a friend like Jeff and you give him a DVD and say, here, watch this movie. And then not only does he never watch it, he never gives you the DVD back.
I don't have any way to watch a DVD, Joe. I can't lie. I don't, like, if you handed me a DVD right now, I don't know if I could watch it.
At the end of my teaching career, I would go to loan a student a movie, and he would say, there's nothing I can watch that on. So then I would just say, well, I guess you'll have to find it on streaming if you can. But,
Yeah.
Yep. The DVD.
I mean, can you imagine a sad existence where you couldn't put in the DVD? I put in 2 of them last time.
That sad existence where everything's just at your fingertips and you just type it in and you can find out where to get it and what you need. Well, that's what a sad existence.
Well, gentlemen, I have a confession to make.
Go for it.
I still have VHS tapes and
There you
a
go.
VHS tape player that works.
That's what I was going to say.
Okay.
I have them when you pry them out of my cold red hands.
I think I was telling Carrie, I might have been telling you, I just recently found at my parents' house, they have one of the old VHS rewinders, where like it pops up and you slide it in, and then it
Does it still work?
yes, I think it does. Yes. So
Those are the days, man.
that is a treasure for me. I think we're holding on to that puppy forever.
Yeah, you know what? That's worth it.
You don't think so? You can't go. Listen, if I dared you right now, you go try to buy a VHS rewinder. Good luck.
But the player rewound it itself.
Yeah, but it did not quickly. Yeah, see, took forever. Took forever.
Only a movie snob guru would give away for it to rewind.
That's true. If it's Titanic and it's 2 parts, you gotta hurry it up. 2 VHSs.
I guess, maybe we can. I'll just reemphasize what I said earlier. The movie world that you guys grew up in is just so different from the one that I grew up in. Because there were no tapes, there were no DVDs, so it was a completely different sort of experience. So it's really cool that now, all 9 of these movies that the 3 of us have just recommended, anybody could go out and find it,
right?
Streaming, or maybe even borrow the DVD from somebody, and it's a very different movie world, and you guys in TV land out there should take advantage of that.
So of these all the bajillion, how many do you own?
Oh, good question.
Are you like a record collector, movie collector?
Oh, I don't know. I probably have maybe 100 VHS and maybe 300 DVDs.
Oh, that's it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The essentials.
Yeah. The rest of my house is taken up with books.
Boy, that's sad.
Yeah.
I feel for you.
Joe,
I'll just tell you, one of my favorite quotes is, "The parameters of male friendship are hyperbole and character assassination." We've had a lot of character assassination today. What happens to hyperbole?
That is very well. Who said that?
It's my favorite author. His name's Randy Wing White.
Okay, that is good.
That is awesome.
Spot on.
Hyperbole character assassination.
Joe, thank you so much for coming on today. Real quick, I'm just going to plug, you are doing North Central Cinema on NorthcentralPa.com, working with Phoebe on that. A show every other week?
Every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks, okay, different reviews. So you can find them at NorthcentralPa.com and on North Central PA's Facebook page. And then we're hoping, we'd like to do this with you once a month, maybe even more often as stuff comes out.
I'm retired, so
there we go.
Movies, so whenever you guys want to talk,
there we go.
About something else, that's fine too.
I know we missed Valentine's Day. We could have done like the best rom-coms or whatever.
We missed that.
We have things like baseball season coming up, and there's been 100,000 baseball movies.
Yeah.
But we can go.
We also mentioned the Oscars is at the end of March too.
Is coming as well.
And that would give me an excuse to watch some of those movies. I think it's the Oscars.
Is coming, or the Oscars are coming?
Good question.
Do either one. End of March. And by the way, Mr. Affleck, whom you mentioned earlier, he has a good shot at winning this year again. He's in a movie called The Tender Bar. He's up.
I keep telling you about that on Amazon.
Yeah, he's very, very good in that film.
Yeah, you got to check it out.
He may have re-arrived, which is really cool.
Well, I was talking with him. You know Tom Woodruff?
Yes.
The Loyal Sox guy. As I just spun myself off the screen. He directed Argo. Ben Affleck did, and just the draw. I mean, he started it, but he directed it as well, and the tension that he created in that. Argo is one of those that, like, if you ever come to it, you can't turn away from it.
Ken, you were talking about world building, Jeff.
Yeah.
We may never get finished with the show today.
That's okay.
A very early film. Well, I think it was Affleck's first directorial effort. This movie called Gone Baby
Gone. Baby Gone.
Yeah.
God, what a movie! You talk about world building.
Oh yeah, really, really good. Yep.
Incredible film. That one's in here too. There's a lot of
that sucks you in. He also did what was it? Gigi Giggly? What was the one?
You know what's funny? I tried to watch it once because I heard it so bad, and I was just like, I gotta see how. I think I made it 45 minutes. I couldn't do it, and I'm not. I don't quit. Like if I start it, I might watch it in stages.
I did, Joe. You'll be surprised to know this. I did one of his more recent ones, The Way Back. Did you watch it? Is it The Way Back or The Way? I did not enjoy it.
I thought it's...
And what was funny is it's a high school basketball movie. It seems like something right up my alley.
The reviews are great.
And people loved it. I did not enjoy it.
I didn't see that one.
No.
Don't waste your time.
All right.
Go watch Jiggly first.
What was that? What is the actual name of that movie?
Is it?
No
I
one
think
can
it's
pronounce
Gigli. Isn't it Jiggly?
I think the second G is silent. I think it's Geely.
Geely? Okay.
We could look it up, but we'll be.
The whole movie should have been silent. It was not good.
That would have been better. Joe, thank you so much for coming on. Again, North Central Cinema at NorthcentralPa.com. And you can find a lot of Joe's work at the Sun Gazette Archives. You can find a lot of Joe's work also on Amazon for his books.
Yep.
There you go. Thanks for coming on, Joe. We'll be back with you again. Thank you guys for listening to the Midday Show today. Thank you to Weiss Markets for being our sponsor. And be sure to go to NorthcentralPa.com for all your local news. Mark and I will be back tomorrow. We'll get back on the news beat. We'll talk about some of the stuff that's going on around the world. Sound good?
Verbally and characters. That is what we're going with.
Thank you guys for watching the Midday.